Hey guys, so this video here, it's kind of a postscript to the video I just finished up and put online about the producer and bass player Bill Laswell. And it's kind of just to give a little more info about some of the guys that he played with that I didn't really cover in the video because it's not necessary for his story. But I'd mentioned when he moved to New York in like '77, he came with a guy named Weeden, who he'd played with in the band, around Lansing and Ann Arbor and places like that. He was a guitarist, and did a little more reading up on him. I guess when they came to New York, they lived together for about a year, and then he kind of went off doing his own thing. He did some recording with Madonna, apparently. I think it might show up like on a B-side of one of her singles, and maybe toured with her. But he put out or was involved in a single, 12-inch single on the Clapper's Music label, and it's I guess really a rap song called Miss DJ Wrap It Up.
You asked for rap, well now you got it. If I can't end it, I won't start it. Even though it's just for fun, the world must know I'm number one. I want the straights on the left, the curves on the right. I'm gonna rap and roll you till you all unite. Get on up, no more sitting down. I am the baddest witch in town. And Master Flash is hot and Curtis Blow is cool. And I'm like
I'd never heard of it. I just found it online. It's kind of interesting. It looks like Clapper's Music is kind of like a reggae label, and it's kind of an odd production, but he's credited with like the rhythm and horn arrangement as well as the production on this single. And I noticed too, it's if you're into early hip hop rap and you've never seen this book, you might want to pick it up. This is by the British musician David Toop. He went to New York in the early '80s and kind of got way involved in the early hip-hop scene, figuring out what it was all about, and wrote this wonderful book called Rap Attack, which is a great on-the-ground documentary history of the early hip-hop movement in New York. But in the back of the book, he lists what he calls his lightning swords of death, which are like 100 important hip-hop singles, early hip-hop and rap singles. And number 70 is this single that Dennis Weeden here did, the Ms. DJ Wrap It Up. So I thought that was interesting. I'd never really caught that before, or made that connection. And as well, he recorded a CD under the alias Menace. Now, I've actually had this in my collection, but I didn't know that's who this was. I always wondered who this guy was. And, but this is an album that Bill Laswell produced. Kind of a funk thing. It's Dennis Weeden on guitar and vocals, and a lot of the P-Funk crew on here. Bootsy Collins, Bernie Worrell. Yeah, it's kind of hit or miss. It's okay.
What you want, feel what you feel. How could you think of me leaving you alone? This is the time to change your mind. It's just so far-fetched.
And there's another CD that this came out in '89, and then like '93, another CD by Dennis Weeden under the name Menace, or actually it's Zupadelica featuring Menace. The CD came out in Japan only. It's it's called The Life and Times of One Chocolate Baby. Another kind of modern funk. And also he did some cool artwork, kind of looks like marker illustrations. He did the cover. I found this fascinating. The cover to Lou Reed's "Take No Prisoners" album. And also Sly and Robbie's Taxi Gang their album called The Sting. Did the cover on that, artwork for that, and the reggae musician Yellow Man did the cover for his album Rambo. The Sly and Robbie and the Yellow Man are both from 1986 on a label called Moving Target, which was associated somehow with Celluloid Records, so probably through his connections with Bill Laswell and Laswell's connections with Celluloid Records that work came about. But I thought that was interesting. Some pretty cool artwork there. So that's Dennis Weeden, one of the guitarists that Laswell played with back in Michigan. And then there's another guy that I discovered just looking around today, who had played with Bill Laswell, and I guess they had a band called Solar Flare. This would have been from about 1973 to 1977. I'm guessing it was like R&B and funk kind of music, basically. He played around Michigan. That would have been like the kind of the sound he'd be playing in the clubs, most likely. And it's this guy named Glenn Brown. He's an interesting guy. It looks like he trained as a sound engineer. He actually started working in a studio in 1972 when he was just 15 years old, and then went to school at Michigan State University and studied audio engineering and some electrical engineering, acoustics, physics, things like that. And now he has his own recording studio. It's called Glenn Brown Productions. And a very successful engineer. He's got, it looked like on his website, 2 Emmy Awards and an Academy Award nomination for his work in TV and movies. And like I guess for advertising, his clients are like General Motors, CBS, Motorola, IBM. And because he's so well, I guess, has so much knowledge about engineering and acoustics and stuff, he also designs studios for people. He designed the recording studios for Eminem and Kid Rock, a couple of his fellow Michigan residents there. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I just found that today. And it's weird how so many people involved with Bill Laswell, you'll see, kind of went on to engineering and production work and kind of made it big. It's kind of strange. And so that was the guys from his band Solar Flare, the guys he played with in Michigan in the 70s, before he came to New York. Now his band in New York, he formed Material, which started out as the Zoo Band under Giorgio Gomelski. Fred Marr, the drummer, he left the band in 1981 after they recorded that album Memory Serves, Material's Memory Serves, which was the last album I showed in the video. He left the band, or kind of left the collective, I guess it's not really a band, but a collective of musicians there, and went back to school. He'd actually dropped out of school, high school, to tour with the band, and in 1982 he went to school at Cooper Union, which is like a prestigious art and design architecture school there in Lower Manhattan, New York City. But he was only there for a year and left to get back into music. He recorded an album with Richard Hell and the Voidoids. This is Destiny Street. He's on here with Robert Quine on guitar as well. Kind of big name in the downtown no-wave music scene. And in 1983, he played on Lou Reed's album Legendary Hearts, which also had Robert Quine on guitar. And then in '84, played on Lou Reed's New Sensations album. And also in '84 he put out an album with Robert Quine, the guitarist. Just the two of them, Fred Marr and Robert Quine. And it's called Basic. And it's on the Editions EG label. If you're familiar with Brian Eno, Robert Fripp, King Crimson and all, you'll recognize that label. But it's just the two of them, guitars, bass, and drum programs, programmed drums, like drum machines. Interesting album. So that was '84, and then in '84, Fred Marr joined the I guess British or Scottish band Scritti Politti, and stayed with them for about 4 years. Was their drummer, and co-produced their albums. And then 1988, got more involved in production full-time. He produced the album by the Information Society, their self-titled album, which had that big hit, What's on Your Mind, Pure Energy. And then in '89, he played again with Lou Reed on his New York album, which had that song Romeo Had Juliet. And then in 1990, he produced and played drums on Lloyd Cole's first solo album. I guess he had broken up Lloyd Cole and the Commotions and moved to New York in '89. And as well, the guy he'd worked with before, Matthew Sweet, he co-produced his album Earth, and then also the album Girlfriend in '91, and played drums on the album. And then in the looks like in the '90s, he was the staff producer at Elektra Records, and he's still involved in production and recording and stuff like that. So that's Fred Marr, the drummer, who started out just as like a 14-year-old kid playing with Bill Laswell and Michael Beinhorn, and backing up David Allen's New York Gong. Kind of a strange story. So then Michael Beinhorn, the guy who played keyboards with Material, he left in 1985 and moved to Los Angeles. I guess they parted on probably not the best of terms. I think Laswell was just kind of moving on with a lot of musicians who were playing at a higher level, and Beinhorn was never like a classically trained pianist or anything. He could play some keyboards, but he was mostly into the like the synthesizer end of it, experimenting with sounds, things like that, and getting involved in the production end of it. And so he left in '85 and moved to Los Angeles, and got involved in really the rock scene out there. And his first big production out there was the Red Hot Chili Peppers Uplift Mofo Party Plan in 1987. And then in '89 did their Mother's Milk album, which of course had the big hit with their cover of Stevie Wonder's Higher Ground. Huge hit. And then some other big albums he's done. In '92 he did Soul Asylum's Grave Dancers Union, which had that big hit Runaway Train. He did Soundgarden's Super Unknown, which had like Black Hole Sun, Spoon Man, and also in '95 he did Osmosis, Ozzy Osbourne's Osmosis, and he did '98 he did Hole, Courtney Love's band Hole's Celebrity Skin. had like the big song Malibu, and then the title track Celebrity Skin. So Beinhorn really got, you know, kind of a big name producer on the West Coast with the rock bands out there, and he's kind of got a reputation of being tough on drummers. I guess he's convinced some people to fire their drummer if the drummer can't lay down a solid rhythm. But yeah, he's moved on with kind of the rock production thing out there, and as LA as Bill Laswell is New York, you know, and his way of life and approach to things. And so then finally Martin Bisi, who was kind of the tech in the band, the engineer, and Bill Laswell convinced Eno to front some money to Bisi to start his a recording studio that Eno could use, and then later Laswell and Bisi used it for their recordings. About 83, he kind of parted ways with Bill Laswell. He kept the studio. Laswell wanted to record more stuff in Manhattan, like at Platinum Island Studios and things like that. And so I think the arrangement was that Bisi would keep the equipment and keep the studio, and in return he wouldn't try to collect royalties on the early recordings that they did together, that he engineered, things like that. But he went on to record some bands like Fetus and Swans. Sonic Youth, a lot of the kind of the cutting edge sort of rock bands in New York City. And it's actually the studio, BC Studios out there in Brooklyn. It's still in operation today, although it looks like, from what I've seen, there's a lot of gentrification happening in that part of town, so who knows how much longer he'll be able to stay there. But that's it. Just thought you might be interested in a little more info on those guys and what they're up to now. And you know, it's just kind of interesting how these guys started out from, you know, kind of humble beginnings and worked their way up, and you know, some of them became big name producers and running their own studios and things like that. It's pretty interesting. So thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next video.